I got asked recently what I actually think about AI job loss. So today I'm going to take some time just to explain the two things which are quite contradictory, but what I think is happening here. So what AI job loss is this idea that as AI models get better and better, a lot of people are going to find themselves out of work. This is because an AI agent or team of agents is going to be able to do their job better, faster, and cheaper. The argument goes that, like we've seen in previous waves of technology disruption, offshoring, outsourcing, loss of manufacturing, all this sort of thing, there's going to be a big group of people who are negatively impacted, where they're going to be out of work, they're going to need to come up with a new skill and capability package to sell themselves in the labour. The argument that it's not going to be like that it's going to be a dawn of a new era, that it's just normal technology, is that other side of the coin. And it goes something like this. It's that, yes, there's been the Industrial Revolution, yes, there's been all of these job disruptions, but what we see in the evidence, in the data, time and time again, is people are creative, humans like other humans, and at some point we are going to maybe lose our job in the office because an AI agent can do the job better, faster, cheaper, but we are going to reskill and pivot our careers and become a senior living care assistant, or I'm not sure what, but this sort of line of argument is very common in the expert class. And this expert class essentially argues that there's a lot of doom and gloom around AI job loss as a threat, that there's a lot of negativity and gloom, and it's unwarranted because their claim is that AI is just a normal technology. Now, there's a lot of complexity in here, and I think that none of this debate is served well by people on what you might say both sides having their own sort of views and perspectives and interests really centered around how they approach the whole problem. If you take the perspective of someone who sits on the AI is going to take an enormous number of the job side of the fence, it's important to ask and understand where they're coming from. So a lot of these people are heavy technology optimists, but are also quite grounded and realistic about how rapidly AI capability is improving, the observed capability of AI tools to do things that are quite complex. The most recent example I'd suggest as coming down on the side of AI will have quite a lot of impact might be around the contribution in solving frontier math problems, the sort of problems that people spend their PhDs and years afterwards working on. Now AI tools can make reasonable efforts at solving these problems in an afternoon. And then there's this thing called lean, where they can prove these mathematical equations and have it verified by other mathematicians and other mathematical models. And just stay with me if you find this a bit crazy, but to my mind, if an AI model can make new contributions and solve unsolved problems at that level of complexity, this is the sort of stuff that PhD mathematicians and above can spend years on. Why do we think that our ordinary office jobs are marked safe from disruption? That's one sort of aspect of how I think about it. On the other side of the fence, people saying that this is not going to be a big thing, well, they would say, well, you still need the human mathematicians with the expertise to check the AI agent's work, to verify the proofs, to see if there are any other mistakes or changes in what we know about mathematical theory or whatever, and that over time people are still going to keep studying maths, you're still going to have math PhD programs, etc., etc. So this tension between the two sides, to my mind, can't be reconciled yet, because we all know that there are still a lot of issues that AI agents have. Sometimes they hallucinate, sometimes they make mistakes, sometimes they will imagine that something happened, or they won't follow instructions and they'll act in an unaligned manner where instead of solving problem A, they'll solve problem A, B, and C, or tell you to your face that problem A isn't actually a problem and you need to solve problem B. Now, this tension, this challenge, I don't think is helped by the pace of change. So my corporate experience was in technology and change in financial services. So my typical piece of work would be a multi-month to multi-year project, which I needed to coordinate a lot of people across the business to get something technical and complex done. Now, a key part of that was understanding the requirements and making sure that all the testing and quality assurance was at the right level, that all of the regulatory obligations, the internal policy obligations, and all of this sort of thing were met. And that meant producing an awful lot of paperwork, but it also meant interrogating and understanding a lot of underlying documentation and archive type stuff sitting on network drives to understand what was really there and what had actually been built. If I think about what an AI coding agent can do for me today, I know looking back at some of the most complex problems I worked on in my corporate career, an AI agent would have sped me up significantly. I would also required fewer human resources. Instead of having many people working on a project, I could probably have gotten away with 1 or 2 people. That is the sort of way that I'd think about a lot of this as a project manager, as a change manager. If I, knowing what I know from my own lived experience, coupled up to my extensive use of AI tools, especially over the last 18 months, I've tried everything, used everything, spent tens of thousands of dollars on AI subscriptions and API usage. Like, I've shipped products, I've done things that I would not have done in the pre-AI era. But if I wrap that all up and I think about what does the medium term look like? Well, if I was asked to solve a problem in the workplace and I had access to these tools, my budget ask is going to be lower. My resource demand is going to be lower. What does that mean? Well, in a lot of banks, for example, you will have to hit FTE reduction or headcount reduction targets every quarter or every year. And a lot of what AI is going to be doing is exactly what offshoring and outsourcing has been doing for the last 20 years. It's an opportunity to reduce headcount, get more work out of the people remaining, and maximize profits. This is just the capitalist world we live in. And when I think about people arguing on the AI as a normal technology side, I often look at some of their CVs, and some of them have never worked in big organizations where if you've worked in these places, you know that there's constant restructures, redundancies, pressures around cost control and managing labor cost quite tightly. So, there's a reason a lot of people will complain about not getting pay rises above inflation or whatever. It's because you are a cost line on a spreadsheet. And AI gives a lot of leaders and businesses an opportunity to more strictly control that cost line. So what are they going to do? Well, to my mind, having worked with a lot of exposure to the offshore world, there are going to be a lot of companies that don't choose to look at this as I'll be able to support more business, I'll hire more people to help me do more. Only a handful of companies think that way. Most will think like they did for offshoring. I'm paying $100 million a year in the US for this capability. I can reduce that to $25 million a year and spend $25 million a year with Anthropic and OpenAI on API spend. So I'll halve my spend for this function. That is going to be something that happens over and over and over again over the next few years. And the reason is incentives, and it's not spoken about enough, but people 100% respond to the incentives that they face. And a lot of corporate executives, especially CEOs and CFOs who have to sit on earnings calls every 3 months and get grilled by 30-year-old Wall Street analysts on why they haven't cut costs fast enough or why they haven't raised revenue fast enough in some category. They want ready answers and they want wins. So if you've ever listened to earnings calls, you know that every leader has talking points. And what I've noticed over the last year or so is that AI talking points are becoming very central to the narrative that a lot of executives are trying to tell the street. So they want to tell their investors and the market that they are cutting cost, they are raising revenue, they have deployed this AI model, they have deployed that AI model, they are generating this return on the AI spend. That's how the world works. And that's how a lot of this transition towards some new world where a lot more work is done by AI agents. You still need a lot of skilled human experts to do the quality assurance and testing and governance and architecture of how all of this hangs together. But that's going to take some time. And what I think is going to happen when I think about change management and the importance of institutional knowledge is some companies are going to pull the trigger too fast on the AI job layoffs. So they're going to lose institutional knowledge. If they already offshored something 10 years ago, think about what the most important thing this year is. Context engineering. If all of those emails back and forth with customers and internal process knowledge about how certain things are done and not done in a business are sitting at your outsourced partner's servers and not yours, well, you don't have that context for your own AI transformation. So as part of this AI job loss versus AI normal technology thing, one other possible consequence is as more firms realize the need to control more inside their own firewall, there might be a reduction in outsourcing and a reduction in offshoring. so that companies have all of that data they can train on and fine-tune themselves. So to circle back to where do I see the AI job loss thing going? Well, I hope it's clear from this that this is such a complex issue, you can't just conclude, oh, AI is going to take all the jobs, or alternatively, AI is just a normal technology. We're very much in a state of flux, and because of slower adoption of AI at the rate that you might see inside a frontier lab, inside an early adopter, inside a San Francisco startup, versus what a big corporate in Australia or Canada or the UK is doing, we're going to see this jagged outcome where some companies are going to realize that not only can they get rid of a lot of jobs, they might be able to shut down entire offices in multiple countries, because what they learned through this process of requirements analysis and designing their new AI first operating model, that there's way more tasks that they can actually automate and automate well. And that's where things like the multimodal, multilingual capability of these AI models become so useful. Think, for example, around what's going to happen to call centers. A lot of people thought they'd already be gone, but it's clear to me, having worked in big organizations, why it will take so long. A lot of things under the hood don't take 1 or 2 days to do. Even if you, looking from the outside in, think that an AI transformation process should be really simple for a big company, we need to understand that they don't have this big bucket of money that is just sitting there ready to be spent 100% on AI. They still need to meet all their client obligations. They still need to meet all their regulatory obligations. They need to keep the business running. And some of these ways of getting the benefits out of AI spend are so high risk for the business itself that they might end up having to keep on a lot of staff for a very long time through this transition period. So when you eventually see the AI layoff, it's going to be in one big 5,000 people laid off one.